Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 109 of the Near Memo with David, Mike, and Greg, and we're talking about all things local, search, social, and commerce. Today we are going to be talking about OLAs. Mike will get into what that is in a moment. And then David and I will be discussing Bard and local SEO on Bard and kind of the outlook for the future, because we had some interesting interactions around that yesterday, and there's been some interesting recent discussion about that. So, Mike, let's lead off with you and OLAs. What are OLAs, and why should we care?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure you should care. It's up to you whether you care or not. OLAs are a new ad type that it's been formally released by Google. They've been sort of in the wild. I think you first wrote about them way back 2020 when you were still at Search Engine Land. These are ads that appear on the business profile for local businesses, whether you get to them through a 3-pack keyword search or we get to them through a brand search, doesn't matter. These are ads that are independent of the business. They can be placed by approved businesses, approved listers. Google has some sort of whitelist to get into this program. They just released a help file on this a couple weeks ago, and the program became public a couple weeks ago. And it's an ad where, for example, we saw these before, where Groupon can advertise against events or tickets, or Michelin can advertise specific tires against tire dealers, or hair product company could advertise hair products against salons that carry their products.
Or the one that we first encountered this with, which was Matt LaQuesta pointed out, DoorDash running ads on merchants who hadn't even opted into DoorDash, and they didn't even officially support DoorDash.
Right. And so these are interesting to me in a number of ways. Firstly, as a way of targeting, of expanding their local targeting down to the brand, and below that with the product level. So it's a type of contextual targeting based on location, which is very granular. I mean, if somebody's looking for a hair salon near me, there's only going to be 3 or 4 places, and one of those or 2 of those could have an ad for a specific type of hair treatment, whatever.
Greg is our resident cosmetology expert here, so
or not, as the case may be. Just a quick interjection there. If it's a salon and there's a hair care product in particular, is there any validation of the fact that it's carried in that particular salon, right? Whether it's carried or not, or is it just an awareness? It becomes just kind of an awareness thing in that context. If they don't have it, how are they going to know if that salon has that hair care product?
It says landing pages should be relevant to feed items for any business entity. Landing page location should match the feed location. I don't know. Images should be unique per feed. It's not clear exactly, although obviously in the case of DoorDash or Groupon, the business has to be participating with that company. And it does seem to be offer related. It doesn't seem to be general advertising related. It's interesting. So it's interesting on one level, that targeting. It's also interesting because businesses that upon which it shows have virtually no control over it. At least in the food business now, you can tell Google through the Google Business Profile to remove this. But in all the other categories in which this might appear, you have to opt out of the program at the original vendor that's running the ad to get taken off the ad. So there is some participation required, I guess, to answer your question, Greg. In other words, to get out of it, you have to go back to Groupon and say, I don't want to be in this program. I mean, the problem with it is that it puts businesses upon whose page it appears in this very awkward position of being literally forced to either carry this product at the discount stated or to eat profit on a sale that would have normally been a full profit sale. And so it really, from a business point of view, sucks terribly because of the lack of control, and there's no way to opt out easily from the obvious place. I mean, how would a business know that they'd have to go back to Groupon to opt out of Groupon? They wouldn't know that, and they wouldn't even know why they're getting so many Groupon sales. All of a sudden, their profit plummets, and they've got 10 times as many Groupon sales because Groupon is leveraging the popularity of the profile. So it's interesting in a million ways, from everything from the way it's leveraging contextual targeting at a very granular level, all the way to the pain that businesses are likely to suffer as a result. It is not clear how you become what Google calls allow listed. Strange word, but obviously they're looking.
What's that word? Spell that word.
Allow listed. It's one word.
ALLOW listed.
Listed, all mushed together.
Allow listed.
Allow listed. Yes, that's the business. So one presumes it's volume based. You must be willing to place it against 6,000 or 8,000 locations or whatever. But they provide data down to the location level, so you can tune it. You can also customize feeds at scale, so you can put one message in one market and a different message in a different market. And you can categorize these. So you could categorize Chicago and New York and do different
offers in different markets.
Different offers in different markets, et cetera. And so one, it's interesting it took 2 years for it to come out. Two, it's interesting that it's out. There's finally a help file. It's finally public. But how do you become allow listed? I still don't know. And I just think it's really problematic ad group. We criticize Facebook for targeting individuals here. I think Google deserves equal or greater criticism for targeting individual businesses.
Yeah. One more absolute slap in the face reminder that your Google business profile is not your Google business profile. It is Google's. So,
right.
Well, and does Yelp,
you can pay Yelp to prevent competitive ads from showing on your profile.
That was going to be my question. That's right. But this is not, I mean, these are not competitive ads per se, but could they be?
You could, if you are working with a participating allow listed agent and have enough scale to engage in the program, could you get these? You could, one presumes, bid on that space, but I think it's competitive bidding. So I don't think you can just say, I want to be there instead of Groupon. And leverages smart bidding. So,
and this is not for small businesses. This is for scaled national brands that are targeting locally, multi-location brands or whatever. What about it
is for them, but it's also for multi-location products.
Right.
It's not even a brand.
Like the hair care product, right? Like Paul, I don't mean this is a bad example, but like Paul Mitchell, right? They don't have to have Paul Mitchell salons. They can advertise Paul Mitchell products in independent salons. So,
which is an interesting sort of CPG play. Groupon isn't CPG, but I mean, hypothetically, you could have national brands that are sold locally but don't have any physical location participate in this, and sort of localizing the brand accordingly. Yep. So that's an interesting dimension of it. Is the following scenario possible with this, where you've got, let's say, a car dealer? I mean, I don't know if this is even appropriate, but you've got a Ford dealer who's advertising on local Toyota knowledge panels or profile. Is that a scenario that this
one would hope that that's part of the allow list review, but
yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if they did allow it, then certainly a Toyota would be very
motivated.
It's no different. Yeah. It's no different than advertising on a brand name Toyota.
Yeah.
That if you're Ford, and that's allowed as long as you don't make unfair comparisons.
Well, I mean, this goes back to some degree to the idea of kind of consumer confusion. If people are searching for brand X and they get brand Y, you can't use you can't appear to be brand Y. Mm-hmm. This was the issue with
unless you're Yelp on Bing.
That's a different question.
If you're not,
well, this was the issue with the I think it was Warby Parker and there was another
1-800 contacts,
right, and so there's the idea of this other company, my competitor, is trying to appear to be me and confuse people. You can bid on brand terms behind the scenes, but you can't use
their trademark in your ad.
Right.
Yeah. You can use the trademark if the landing page actually does a comparison and you mention the trademark term you're showing. If you're not, if it's just going to your page, then
if there's intent to deceive, that's where you run into problems. But that's not necessarily an issue with these ads. This is a sort of a tangent. So Mike, I sense that you might be wanting to write a longer feature article on this topic.
Well, the problem is I would if I could get access to information about it. I don't even know who to talk to about the product and and where it's showing currently.
Well, what
And
about
we know it
our?
was rolled out in Europe,
Yeah.
but I don't know who here, who in the United States has it. I'd like to see, I'd like to see it in play, and I'd like to hear from businesses upon which it's being placed, or businesses that are placing it, see what kind of performance
Well, it's
there is. So
pretty challenging probably to find those folks. I mean, you could.
it might be, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm putting the word out here. So if you know of anybody, let me know.
Our legion of
Well,
followers will let us know if they've been affected.
We could go directly to the Google, press at Google. I mean, I haven't pinged that email in years now.
Sure, let's do that.
Let's see what they say.
Right.
Okay, all right. So David and I are going to be talking about Bard and Bard local SEO and some experiences that David initiated yesterday around some local search. Miriam Ellis also wrote an interesting piece about comparing Google SEO or Google local results and Bard local results. But David, why don't you tell us about your experience yesterday?
Sure. So
Or
I was
whenever
prompted.
it was.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Whenever it was, I don't remember during the week. It was like 2 days ago, I guess.
Earlier this week. So I was prompted by Miriam Ellis's similarly themed post on Moz, where she was looking for tacos near her on Bard and kind of going through, Bard didn't do such a great job of targeting locally initially, and then they did, and then it was not entirely clear where the results were coming from. So she took sort of a deep dive into local tacos. And I was like, I actually haven't done any of these kind of searches in Bard yet in that level of detail. Like, that's really interesting. So I just was, I gave a SEM PDX presentation the other night and thought there might be some interesting fodder for that. So I just did a couple of searches just to kind of see what the results were and what I could get Bard to do. I looked for a particular category of lawyer. I looked for golf courses, and I looked for breweries. And then I also looked for things to do, which we'll get to at the end of this. But in all three cases, it was pretty interesting. The results were close. Well, in the case of breweries and golf courses, the results were close to what you would have seen in the local pack and organic if you sort of mash them together. The golf courses one actually mirrored Google's knowledge graph. You don't get a 3-pack. For golf courses, you get these sort of interesting tiles coming from the knowledge graph at the top. That was almost a 1-to-1 mirror. So clearly there's the pretty tight integration between the knowledge graph and Bard. But the results were definitely not 1-to-1 sort of overall. And so I said, Bard, how are you getting these results? And sure enough, Bard gave me an answer. And the answer was looking at Yelp, looking at effectively the default number one sort of review portal in that industry or in that space. So the local bar association for this lawyer search and Avo were mentioned explicitly. For the golf course search, it was TripAdvisor and the local golf association here in Oregon. And then for breweries, it was the Oregon Brewers Guild and Untapped. And so it was like the takeaways for me were that, okay, I don't think we need to sort of panic about local SEO for Bard right now, given that you would want a profile on, and Bard also looked at the top, it also said it looked at the top Google results for that term. And so the takeaways were like, okay, you want a profile on Yelp, you want a profile on your most prominent industry directory, and you want to rank in Google's results. It's like, okay, well, you're hopefully doing all of those three things already as part of your local SEO campaign. The interesting thing, though, is where I do think that there's a lot of room for exploration is around why are those results, not exactly the same. It was particularly stark for lawyers where you got a list of sort of 7 individual lawyers, not a law firm to be found there at all, individual lawyers. And I did probably half an hour of searching trying to figure out how they put that particular list together, because they didn't all appear at once in anything close to that order on any site out there, where the best lawyers, super lawyers, Avo, any directory site. And so they're really munging the results together from all these sources. And if you can figure out how Bard is doing that, I think that would be potentially really compelling if Bard sort of reaches a critical mass level of search. The follow-up search that I did was maybe more interesting and more concerning, particularly as the president of the Tinfoil Hat Society. So I said, okay, find me some things to do on my drive from Dublin to Dunlow, which I'm going to be in Ireland next month. Find me some things to do. And it spat out a list of things to do. And I said, okay, how did you come up with this list? Same question I asked about the previous searches. And it said that it was looking at, essentially it was looking at my location history and my search history. And I said, well, location history, like I have that disabled. Oh, I misspoke. I was only looking at your search history. That's a much more useful sort of input to my recommendations. And then I was like, I feel like that's something I probably would have disabled, but maybe not in the account I was searching Bard under. Like, let me go and see. Sure enough, I'd also disabled my search history. And so it was very clear and then I said, well, I also disabled this. Like, are you really using this?
It's disabled in quotes.
Right. No, exactly. This is the point is like Google has been found to be abusing explicit opt-outs historically on numerous occasions. And I feel like they're doing it again. It's pretty obvious. Like, why would Bard lie about those things? If Google weren't actually using them as part of the Bard algorithm.
I mean, one of the fundamental questions here is, can we believe what Bard is saying, right, about its sources or anything that it tells us about the rationale behind the scenes?
So even if we can't believe that, I feel like
it's
disturbing, absolutely something that an investigator, like, I don't know, the FCC or somebody should absolutely be diving into the weeds of the whatever LLM algorithm is at Google. Like, I've explicitly opted out of Google using this for any Google product. And here is a Google product that at least seems pretty, it said that I had previously been to like cultural and historical sites in Ireland, which is true. So how did it know that if it's not actually using my location history?
Well, right. So that's a strong suggestion that it is. And you're right that Google has a history of sort of saying one thing about privacy to users, making these statements and representations, and then being caught doing things that, you can disable your location history, but we're going to get location from web and app, information that you haven't disabled. So
I had disabled that as well. That's the thing. So like
right. But yeah, it's very concerning. It's very concerning if this is true. I mean, again, we can't know because of the hallucination factor, although this isn't hallucination exactly, what part of this is accurate, what part of it is not. I mean, it might be that Bard is telling you I'm using these 4 sources and it's actually using 10 sources, or it's not really using one of the 4 that it mentions. I mean, that's a possibility. Although Google quality raters have apparently been deployed for continuous kind of improvement of Bard. So that suggests that what Bard is going to tell you is going to be more and more true over time about how it arrives at its conclusions. But I mean, I did a bunch of these kinds of searches in the beginning. I did a bunch of local searches, and I did a bunch of best searches, best roofer, best brunch, best whatever. And in one particular case, which initiated some debate on Twitter, I think it was best roofer. And it was giving me review counts. It didn't show me stars, but it was giving me review counts in the results. And I think Jason Brown maybe was the one who looked up. There were a couple of people who looked up these actual listings and said that there was no relationship between what was being said in Bard and the actual review counts in Google. But I also thought in those results that you got in the rationale, where did these results come from? I found interesting that Google, there was always a directory there for the 3 that was not review based. It was just a list, it seems like. And then it felt to me like they were leaning more, we discussed this in the green room. It felt to me like they were leaning more heavily on reviews in that list of 4 sources than they do maybe in the normal ranking factors. I mean, reviews are a heavy influence, obviously, in the local ranking factors. But it was like, go ahead.
Oh, I did a similar search on jewelry appraisals in Buffalo, which is interesting to me because once the local algorithm narrowed its radius, both in 2013 and 2019, Barbara Oliver, who's in one of the suburbs, fell out of that listing, but had always done well organically on it. And they made it quite clear that she was number one because of her Google Maps and her reviews, Yelp reviews, Facebook reviews, and her website. And then I asked how they did the overall list, and the Bard said, well, in addition to Google Maps, Yelp, Facebook, and the website, where they looked at the selection, jewelry prices, and customer service policy, they also considered reputation, expertise, selection, price. And under expertise, they specifically mentioned they were looking for gemologists, right? So this comes back to this
EEAT. Yeah.
EEAT idea on your website, that you need to document that. So it, in some ways, reflects best practices.
So you're saying you did the search, she's number one, you asked it why is she number one, and this is the rationale you're getting.
This is the rationale for both her being number one and how they assembled the list in general.
Yep.
I asked both questions.
And I would agree that the results that I saw tended to have a much wider geographic footprint than the typical pack results do. So This could be, if this holds, if this trend holds, I think it's probably a good thing for most SEO, any business that's hiring an SEO, and SEO agencies. Certainly you can widen the impact of your results in Bard relative to what you can do in GBP.
So all of this it may or may not matter. It all depends upon Bard adoption and more broadly sort of chat adoption as an alternative to search. And there are multiple indicators,
which depends on Google's attitude towards the product. I mean, for years and years and years, local was buried when all it needed was a bump on the front page, right? And they've refused to do that. And so, I mean, it really comes down to Google doing what Bing did. God forbid they should be following Bing, and that is surfacing this prominently as a feature of search so that it becomes integrated in an easy and fun way. I mean, really up to Google.
So there's two issues. One is all these chat engines as alternatives to Google, and then Google's integration of Bard into search, which it said it's going to do. And there's the Bing GPT approach, which is kind of a button that takes you into a different UI, and then there's the Neva approach, and I think this is true for. There's a couple others that are doing something quite similar, which treats it as a sort of a giant snippet at the center of the page, the top of the page, and then there's there's like a right rail kind of approach where you would get a SERP and then you would get the chat results on the right. So I totally agree that the way that this rolls out in Google is going to determine how much it's used, how widely it's used. It would be pretty interesting to be able to have a side-by-side comparison on Google with chat on the right rail. There's some evidence, whether or not it's going to turn out to be true in fact, but there's some survey-based evidence that people are open to alternatives to Google using sort of AI search. There was a Morning Consult survey. I did a little survey on LinkedIn, and I wrote about this, and Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, and I think there was a total of 300 and something responses, and it was like, are you using something alternative to Google, or have you stopped using Google? And 30% of people said, 30-ish% of people said, yeah, I'm using side-by-side alternatives to Google. And then in the Morning Consult survey, it was like, if you're under 60, about a third of the people said, yeah, I'd be open to substituting something else for Google. So people seem to be.
Hold it, I'm not under 60 and I'm open to substituting.
Well,
I am the exception that proves the rule.
No. So yes, you're an outlier, but just if you look at the population as a whole, it's something like 28% or something. But if you remove the boomers, basically, then it's a higher number. And so this is interesting to me because it shows that people are ready for something new, something different. And David, you and I have debated this. I feel like the chat UI is much less fatiguing to look at and deal with than the Google SERP, especially now with the fav icons everywhere. I find that to be more. That's designed to give you a sort of a helpful way to quickly assess credibility of results or whatever. But I think that adds to the fatigue. I mean, just the visual overload of that page and the idea of like having to go click in, click out, click in, click out, refine the query. I just find it much faster to do this in chat. The problem with chat, of course, is that it's not trustworthy. We don't know how to assess the credibility of those results at this point.
Yeah, I guess I would say I still disagree that it's easier to scan, particularly for local results. I think it's much easier to scan a local pack than the text-based list of 8 that or whatever that Bard spat out. I would say quality-wise, I also think that the I have no ability to evaluate the quality of those lawyer results. I do have some ability to evaluate the golf course and breweries results. And I didn't do a very good job on breweries, honestly. It missed 2 or 3 of the very clearly trending and also very well-established breweries in Portland in favor of some that are, one of which is actually went out of business in 2019. So the quality was very, very poor. And even that question aside, I still would rather I want to see these things placed on a map. I want to see relatively how close they are to where I am. I want to see, are they known for a particular style of beer, which Google is now highlighting in the little blurbs, especially if you're in Google Maps. Yeah, exactly. So I just think that the UI is sort of permanently substandard for many, many, many types of local searches, even if the quality does come up to par. So.
Well, Bing puts graphical information in the chat results. This could evolve to the point where contextually you were getting certain kinds of information. So I think that it will evolve, and I think that it can get better from an information quality standpoint and also from a UI standpoint. But I'm just drawn to the simplicity of it, I have to say. In so many instances, I just am finding in my own behavior when I'm looking for fact-based information, I'm just going to these sites. I'm using Google, I'm using Perplexity, I'm using ChatGPT. Sometimes I use Bing, sometimes I use Neva, and I'm just getting this information quickly. If I have reason to doubt it or I'm skeptical about it, I'll go somewhere else and verify. I'll look at Google or I'll look at another one of these sites and see what they say. But it's just faster in some of these situations to get information.
There is one SEO tactic that anecdotally I'm seeing here. I just did breakfast restaurants in Olean, and I did the same thing, followed up where and why, what criteria did Bard use. And here, instead of saying the qualifications of the jeweler, they looked at the selection of food as a criteria. I looked at the selection of food offered at each restaurant. I wanted to make sure that there was a variety of options to choose from, including both classic American fare and more unique and creative dishes. And then they also looked at the hours of operation that were convenient. This is a quote, for me being Bart, not you. It didn't say you. It said me. So,
well, this is, and you don't know if that's all bullshit. It may be all bullshit.
Yeah. Well, it's Bard's bullshit.
Also,
so
Mike,
SEO is bullshit.
Are there restaurants in Olean that have anything besides classic American fare?
Yeah. Oh, that place I did that thing on, which ranked first here, Spot to Be. There were these very fancy sort of stuffed French toasts with chocolate and cream cheese.
Well,
I would describe that as classic American fare, but.
Well, whatever.
There's a scenario where with Bard just is kind of a better version of what you get currently with Google, notwithstanding what you're saying, David, about
there is a scenario. I agree that there's a scenario where that's true. I guess I don't think the interface has been perfected for maximum speed yet. So
definitely not. But we're in sort of the very, very beginning of all of this, and it's possible that Google could. Let's just imagine that Google brings all of its information that it has currently that you get in the Google SERP into Bard, and then Bard allows you to do things that are more personalized or not the data troll, the data trolling business that you're talking about, or but it allows you to do these much more esoteric things that you can't currently get.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting where you could say, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I do agree. Totally agree that it's better for query refinement and sort of drilling down on particular answers than Google allows for today, for sure. So.
Yeah, but it's just, people that are dismissing it right now are not allowing for the possibility that it will get better. And I absolutely think it'll get better. I
So-
mean, what's really, yeah.
So that's true, Greg, but just remember what happened with Apple Maps, right? Apple Maps had this huge rollout and people tried it. It sucked. And Apple still hasn't regained the sort of critical mass of enthusiasm for the product that they had when it initially rolled out, even though it's gotten to parity, if not being better than Google Maps. So there's a huge risk, I think, in releasing a substandard product that people just don't use because it's terrible. Even allowing for that product to get better over time. So
I totally agree. And I think that that's Google's concern. I think Google is very cognizant of that issue, and they're very fearful of damaging their brand or damaging the user experience to the point where people, become, I think trust is a huge issue for a lot of these big companies now. And so they have to tread very carefully. So I'm in complete agreement with that. But I think so that opens the door for somebody who doesn't have all that brand equity to do something really interesting,
like Bing.
Bing is frustrating to use. I think the Bing GPT is frustrating to use, for me at least. But I think what's interesting is are all these vertical plays with their plugins. Kayak and Expedia and OpenTable and some of these other sites that are trying to integrate it for a more personalized or a more elaborate search experience. Now, I tried Expedia. It's not available on the desktop. It's only on the app, and it kind of sucks. It's not integrated. It keeps pointing you to Expedia. When you ask it sort of Expedia-like queries, it says, "Oh, why don't you go over and try Expedia?" Even though that's it's part of the app. Now, all of those presumably will get better, but those are interesting sort of local plays that could start to draw people in if the UX is good, but it's not at the current time. Mike, you wanted
to I asked if Google could if Bart could make a reservation for the spot to be. And Bart answered, "Sure, I can help you make a reservation for the spot to be restaurant only. And here are the details. April 15th, I don't know how to pick that date. Time 10 a.m., party size 4. I don't know how I picked any of those things. It said, though, would you like me to call the restaurant to make the reservation?
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting. So is that the duplex integration?
Don't know. I haven't told it yes.
It could all just be, well, tell it yes.
Report back.
What happens.
Take the reservation and report back on next week's Near Memo.
Well, it could all just be BS. I mean, what these systems do is they're predicting. It's mind-boggling how they work, and I don't really fully understand it. But it's using these huge, all this data that it's kind of captured to predict what the next logical thing in sequence would be. And people who create these systems don't fully understand how they work. And there's a kind of next generation version of this called Auto GPT, where they're working in a more autonomous fashion from these
So at your insistence, I typed yes to the query, and it immediately came back and said, "Sure, I'll call the restaurant right now." It's like no time wasted. And then it gave me the transcript of the call. It totally invented a transcript of the call. It says, "Calling the spot to be a restaurant. Me, hi, I'd like to make a reservation for 4 people. Restaurant, sure. What name would you like the reservation under? Me, it's under Bard. Restaurant, okay, I have you down for 4 people on April 15th at 10 a.m. Is there anything else I can help you with? Me, no, that's all. Thank you. Restaurant, you're welcome. Have a great day. Your reservation is confirmed. Please arrive at the restaurant 15th for your reservation time."
Right. So that's just
totally just made this up whole cloth. So.
But it's making it up from some transcript somewhere that it has access to, right?
Right.
So this is a major problem for these systems is that
but it's clear that they're capable of driving this towards duplex.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Wouldn't be a stretch.
Right. I mean, imagine if you're in a situation where you say, give me the 4 best brunch places in Olean, New York that have availability on such and such a date and such a time,
right?
And it's accurate, and then it can do the reservation. I mean, think about
that was just the promise of voice search, yeah,
which never fully materialized.
Yep.
But now these virtual assistants are back sort of through the side door with all this LLM stuff. So obviously we could go on and debate all of these things, and we'll
we can make reservations at restaurants across the country live on
that don't exist. Yeah. And then you show up at the restaurant and you say, "Hey, I'm here for my reservation.
My name's Bard."
Yeah. A party of 4 for Bard.
And they say the Bard?
Well, I mean, it raises all kinds of interesting questions about misinformation and all of that, which we'll talk about at another time and continue to talk about. But anyway, so thanks for joining us this week, and be sure and tell your friends. Come back next week for more exciting adventures in the world of local.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.